our guest speakers for our solution.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we invite Professor Banji, our first speaker. Professor Banji is the outgoing director of Region of Africa Office, UN Habitat. He is a leader in the field of development economics and a passionate champion for African development who strives to transform ideas into practical solutions.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, David. Thank you, colleagues. I always marvel at the efficient way in which people gather together very early in Kenya. Each time you get an invitation to gather at 7 o'clock, 7:30, I always ask my wife, how do these people do it? Thank you so much for coming. It shows that we all take this matter very seriously. And I want to thank David and his group, the colleagues who have put together this meeting this morning. My assignment is very simple. I want to welcome all of you with an introductory speech. And let me just quickly read portions of it so I don't take too much time. The Tenancy Purchase Initiative aims at interrupting the deteriorating housing conditions in Africa with the aim of bridging the shortfall in the housing stock arising from demand that far outstrips supply, obviously. The situation has been exacerbated by population explosion, rapid urbanization, widespread poverty, escalating costs of providing housing. The shortage in housing is manifested in overcrowding, proliferation of slums and informal settlements in semi-urban areas. In the rural areas of Africa, and I want to stress that the vision of ATPI is not limited to Kenya. The idea is for this model to be tested here and to go all over the continent. In the rural areas, the shortage manifests itself in poor quality of housing fabric, lack of basic services such as clean water. Tenancy Purchase intends to bridge the housing shortage that is evident in the country. For many years, the tenant purchase schemes have been associated with only government agencies. But now the proposal is to take it broadly to all aspects of our society. To be sure, the overall goal of housing policy all over Africa, including Kenya, is to facilitate adequate shelter, healthy living environment, and affordable cost to all socioeconomic groups. But of course, as we have just heard from our anchors, the mortgage system is not working well, and we need to find alternative models. Now, to be sure also, what we are doing today is consistent with the New Urban Agenda. The New Urban Agenda was adopted in Quito last year in Ecuador, in Latin America. Let me read a few lines of the New Urban Agenda to you. One of the preambles to the New Urban Agenda reads as follows. We will promote, we means all the member states of the United Nations that signed off to the New Urban Agenda. We will promote housing policies based on the principles of social inclusion, economic effectiveness, and environmental protection. We will support the effective use of public resources for affordable and sustainable housing, including land in central and consolidated areas of our cities with adequate infrastructure, and to encourage mixed income development in order to promote social inclusion and cohesion. We will encourage developing policies, tools, mechanisms, and financing models that promote access to a wide range of affordable, sustainable housing options, including rental and other tenure options. So what we are doing today is consistent with the global goals of affordable housing. In regard to housing finance, research shows that throughout Africa, households, whether rich or poor, tend to finance and construct their own houses from their savings. Although housing markets are developing, private developers are concentrated in the high-end commercial sector, with the low-income housing in particular dominated by informality. And much of our informal sectors are slums. As we all know very well, slums are an aggregation of extremely poor people that lack adequate water, that have poor building construction materials, that do not have sanitation, and also that also do not have property tenure. Those are the characteristics of a typical slum. We need to change this narrative for Africa. This, therefore, calls for governments and local authorities to increase their contribution in delivering social housing for poorer urban residents who cannot afford mortgages, including women, the elderly, and the increasing members of university students. Mortgages in Africa account for less than 1% of commercial bank assets, and only 3.1% of overall GDP, except for South Africa and Namibia, which has slightly higher values. It is noteworthy to signal that the context of rapid urban population, especially the growing middle class and economic growth since 2000, has contributed to an emerging mortgage market. On the positive side, actually, cities, tend to have a disproportionately high percentage of overall GDP of cities. When a city is properly planned and designed, it has the possibility to actually change the whole asset of a country. The Kenyan government also recognizes that the sound rents policy can stimulate investment in housing, and that rents levels should be determined by forces of supply and demand. In the final analysis, however, the answer to high rents lies in getting more houses built, and this is our challenge. We need to get more houses built in a way that's affordable and accessible to the majority of our population, most of whom are below the poverty line. With the current shortages, however, the government need to protect the interests and rights of the poor and the marginalized, and to keep rents level under review. Kenya, to note, has a housing shortfall of 200,000 homes annually. This means that less than 1% of all the total Kenyan population are homeowners. Singapore has housing penetration of 94%. Its population are as homeowners. This is consistent also with much of the Asian countries where housing penetration is over 50%. The ATPI, the African Tenant Purchase Initiative, which we are talking about here today, was created to complement existing housing finance mechanisms. Its core objective is to enable the most underserved and vulnerable own homes with relatively more ease than the condition that currently prevails. Tenants Purchase is a scheme which in previous years only allowed for tenants in public housing. This needs to change because the proportion of those working within government sector is relatively low. The scheme is an alternative payment method for property acquisition, whereby the home buyer makes a down payment and is able to access facility before fully paying for it within an extended period of time, say 25 to 30 years. Under certain market conditions, when banks are tight on credit, the knock-on effect this has on property affordability can afford many buyers that are unable to purchase a home in the traditional way. In these situations, creative solutions like tenant purchase, rent to own become an attractive option. And this is what we need to all agree today. As David said, do we go forward or do we remain where we are? We need to change the system because the level of development in Africa cannot be compared with what we have in Asia, where mortgage systems tend to work better with the middle class. Not many could do that in our region for now. There are several countries where these have been adopted. The rent to own in a couple of countries in Africa, but is still at a very nascent phase. Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, for sure. But we need to raise our game, and we need to quicken the pace of development of this particular model. Tenant purchasing may sound like a mortgage, but the two are different. For one, the requirements under a tenant purchase scheme are not as stringent and as detailed as those of the mortgage system. The approval process for tenant purchase is simpler, faster, sometimes taking only 2 weeks. Approval for a mortgage application, on the other hand, could take as long as 90 days due to the registration formalities. Furthermore, the cost of borrowing under tenant purchase is lower than a mortgage, and the monthly payment, rent are fixed. And should you default, the foreclosure deadlines are flexible, with several warning letters coming before a public advert with a public notice period. This is unlike a mortgage where demand letters are issued and followed swiftly by litigation. In addition, one can easily sell off one's house under a tenant purchase agreement because getting the developer's consent and change of records is quite much faster. With a mortgage, the process takes longer due to various consents and discharge of charge against titles. Finally, in a tenancy purchase scheme agreement, the buyer enjoys a grace period. This is the period between the payment of the deposit and when the house is ready for occupation. There is yet another grace period between receiving the letter of occupation and starting to pay monthly. I'd like to close here and to wish every one of us a good deliberation today. This is a call for all of us to put minds together and to say that this is a vital and important model which we hope all of us will join hands to develop further. What we have before us is not perfect, and we are looking to discuss with all of you to better develop and sharpen on the model. Welcome one more time, and have fun today. Thank you.
Our next speaker is, we would like to hear a little bit about the policies that the government has as far as tenant purchase is concerned. What have they done? What are they planning? On behalf of Aida Munam, who is the PS for the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, we would like to invite Mr. Moses Katan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Degwa and Christine. On behalf of the PS State Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are greatly privileged to be invited today to share with you issues of policies, legislation, and policy guidelines that the ministry has put in place to guide this very strategic intervention that you're coming up with. And I therefore wish to observe all protocols here present. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to be with you here today. Firstly, because tenant purchase is something that is very close to the government for several reasons. For one, there are basically two modes of delivering or accessing housing in this country. You are all aware that you can access either through rental approach or ownership. And it is very unfortunate that in this country, 8% of Kenyans are renters. Not because they want to rent, but because they are compelled by circumstances, especially financial circumstances, to go for that option. It is only very few who are able to access mortgage. We are told it is only about 11% who are able or can afford mortgage. I don't want to go into the figures that have already been shared with you by my colleague, Professor. But we are told again that by 2016, only about 24,458 Kenyans were able to access mortgages. The rest cannot access mortgage. I've said it is because of financial limitations. we are told again that about 75% of Kenyans earn less than Kenya shillings, 50,000 shillings per month. So because we are all here to see how we can package delivery of housing, these are the kind of parameters we need to think about so that we start having or coming up with business strategies to deliver housing to this country. It is not easy, but it is the way to go. I'm saying this because if we continue focusing on the mortgage, we are saying it is only about 11% Kenyans who can go for that houses that we're producing. The rest, they either go to the slums in form of settlement or go for the rental option, which we are saying it is not the option that Kenyans aspire to want, but they are compelled to go to want that because that is the only option they can afford. So what, as an introduction, tenant purchase is an alternative payment method for property acquisition where homeowners make down payment and are able to access the facility before fully paying for it. And this is done on a long-term basis, and that's why it is more affordable than mortgage. But what is fundamental is that most developers in this country tend to shy away from this model as it ties down their cash flow for a long time. But I'm very pleased that with the profiles I'm seeing here today, I think that attitude is changing. That disposition is changing because we are developing a lot of interest in tenant purchase initiative, and I think this is the way we need to go forward. The Kenya government and developers are unable to cope with that challenge because, again, of these limitations that we're talking about. Currently, the figures we are talking about, because it is good to have facts with us so that we see how we can address the challenge. The 24,000 mortgage we're talking about translates into only 3.15% of the GDP. This is quite small compared with other countries like Singapore, the country which has been shared by Professor Obedi from UN Habitat. And we are told the average mortgage of those numbers is 8.3 million Kenya shillings. How many Kenyans in this country can afford an average house going at 8.3? Very few, definitely. And that's why we need to go either the rental, and I'm saying rental because there are those people who by choice would wish to go for rental. But for the majority who aspire to one's ownership, the better option is the tenant purchase that we're talking about today. Why is the tenant purchase approach preferred in this country? There are basically about 5 challenges that come with mortgage that push people towards the other options. And one of them is mortgage requires several upfront commitments. Those from the banking sector and for the real estate sector knows that there is demand for commitment fees that constitute about 1.5% of the loan amount. There is also the exercise duty tax, which is about 10% of the commitment fee. There is also stamp duty at 5.4% of the value of the property. There is also stamp duty for the charge, which is charged around 0.1% of the loan. We are also compelled to open an account. And obviously, you cannot open an account without putting money into that account. There is also the valuation fees that you are expected to undertake for the property you wish to buy. And there is also the legal fees that you pay to the advocates upfront. There is also the insurance for the mortgage. The above costs usually range from 5 to 9% of the property value. Therefore, the government advocates the direction towards tenant purchase because it's more affordable. And we believe if we join hands as government, the private sector, the international organizations in the country, and all other stakeholders, then we can start addressing the challenges that we are facing in this country. I will not go into the benefits of the tenant purchase approach because Professor Baji has covered that one very well. But I'll share with you the experiences that we have in this country before I go to the policy guidelines that basically we are supposed to share today. We have a lot of experience in this country in terms of delivery of tenant purchase housing. In the government, in the public sector, the National Housing Corporation has been delivering tenant purchase since it was incorporated, and they have a wealth of very rich experience. And anybody who wishes to venture into this area can compare notes with what the National Housing Corporation has been doing. They have a lot of experience in this area. The National Social Security Fund also have delivered several housing projects in this country using the tenant purchase model. And the State Department of Housing itself has also delivered several housing projects that are also underpinning the tenant purchase approach. You are aware that the government has established a civil servants housing fund that caters or delivers housing for the civil servants. There is also another fund that delivers housing for state officers. And there are guidelines that any other organization, including the counties, and any other public agencies can also establish their own funds to deliver housing through, again, the tenant purchase approach. Let me now focus on the housing policy issues and regulatory framework that we have in the country that I think is the most important thing that you want to hear. We have the current housing policy of 2004, which we've been reviewing with most of you who are here, stakeholders. It is now in the final stages of being adopted by Parliament because we've finalized everything from our part, and it is now ready for adoption by Parliament. In fact, we pushed it for near adoption, but when the campaign started, we were told to defer it until the next Parliament. But what I want to say to you is it is ready, it has been reviewed. But obviously it is existing, but we've reviewed it to align it with the new constitution and to address the emerging issues that we have in the country, including issues of tenant purchase. And although the earlier 2004 policy issues of tenant purchase, we are emphasizing them. We are showing strategies on how we can fast track the delivery of housing through tenant purchase and rental approaches. So there is a lot of bold commitment and support for this new approach. The policy particularly encourages employers to facilitate their employees to access housing for several reasons. There is a motivation. Employers have a social responsibility to empower their employees to access housing. And obviously the immediate returns, because those employees will be more productive and they'll be more committed to to their work. But now for the larger business community, we've been told very clearly that mortgage is not working, and we cannot continue producing houses that are not selling off. So we need to repackage other approaches so that we can start delivering to the larger majority of Kenyans. You can imagine if the business community in this country is delivering for only the 20% and ignoring the rest 7 to 8%. We also have a social responsibility to deliver to the rest of Kenyans, and that's why we need to crack this area of how we can deliver affordable housing to the rest of Kenyans. To read by example, I've said the government has done several projects in this country. We've done the slum upgrading in Kibera, and the approach we are using to deliver the houses to those communities is again the tenant purchase approach. We were being encouraged to use the rental approach, but when we sat down with the communities, they were preferring the tenant purchase approach, and so that is the direction we've taken. And from the experience we have with the UN Habitat, it is working so far. Obviously, there must be issues of subsidy, but sustainable subsidy. And we are looking at other models of ensuring that we deliver on subsidy basis, but sustainable subsidy, especially cross subsidies. You are aware that we've delivered several other projects in the country for the civil servants in Kileleshwa, in Gara, in Jogoo Road, and other parts of the country. Right now we are delivering Kisumu. We want to do some more projects in Kiambu, Machakos, Embu, Nyeri, and Thika. The National Housing Corporation is also embracing on new projects. And as I've said, they've been doing this one since their inception. And these projects are all over the country. But we are told there are ongoing ones currently in Kisii, Kakamega, and other parts of the country. Finally, as I close, I want to challenge the business community in this country that as we share these deliberations in this room, we need to come up with concrete proposals that can be translated into action or better tenant purchase projects in the near immediate future. You can count on the government. We are ready to support you. Besides the policy guidelines that I've already shared, we also have incentives in place that the government has put in place. You remember during the budget speech,